So thanks for coming out and staying around for the whole day. I will try to be on time so we can get to lightning talks and then to beer provided by Quansight, which we all love. I assume there's going to be beer, but I wasn't told that, so don't expect it. Yeah, so I'm here representing NumFOCUS, but I also wear a hat as a chief data scientist at Rex, and thought I'd talk about a little bit about like what it means to be the head of a data science team and being a head in the world of data or whatnot. First off, kind of talk about how I got here. It's not maybe the most traditional method, but effectively, we raised a bunch of money, ex-data DARPA, and I think someone else actually talked about it. Being very cagey about commitments, like in my academia and industry, I don't know what I want to do, I don't know what to do. And then eventually, the startup title inflation racket called me. Thanks, Travis. I think he's over there. So at some point, I just became the data head, right? So there was no like rhyme or reason why I was the head at that point. It was just I was leading the project. And so you had to learn kind of on the job, like what is it going to take to like actually take a data team to real goals and success. And since then, I mean, I was at Anaconda in the first early days, leading the data team. We led that to about 50 folks. Then I went and led a company that was invested by Mark Cuban, and we led to a nice product company of about 10 folks, and that one kind of went pretty well. And then now I'm at Rex, which is, we're taking a data team, started there with like 30 folks and about 2 data scientists, and now about 20 data scientists and about 300 folks. So, and over the times I've helped advise quite a few data teams. So over the last 7 years, I've been pretty active as a data head in trying to help people do these things. But I really just kind of got into it because I was there and had the hubris to take the title. So if you're thinking about leading, like sometimes just go in and just start doing it is the first thing I'd say. Kind of to think about, to frame this talk, I was kind of, how many people have ever heard of Noah Wasserman's Founder Dilemmas? How many people have ever seen this book? Okay, 1. All right, great. You all have a 700-page, sorry. Is he okay? All right, yeah. Founder of NumPy, we saved him back there. Awesome. A dilemma, find a chair. Anyways, great book, 700 pages, so you don't have time to read it, so here it is in one slide. Noah Wasserman went and analyzed, I believe, like 150, not data science, but companies, and said, what are the decision points in a company? What are the things you have to understand at each decision point? And how do you make those decisions? How have other people made those decisions? And I mean, he would just love WeWork these days, because a lot of like what he analyzed was on Twitter, and like how Ev Williams' girlfriend owned like a whole bunch of early things, and like now he's just like, oh man, you got to rewrite this book with WeWork. But he came up with these kind of 4 kind of dilemmas or trade-offs between the relationships, roles, rewards, and then this kind of like thing I use a lot is like wealth versus control. So you can either have a company that's going to make money, or you can have a company that you can control really well. And in general, if you try to make more money, you end up getting a lot less control, but you do end up making more money in companies like, but all others, that you can be the king, right? And so that's kind of like the trade-off at every point of the career, like the career of a founder is like, at what point when you set up your relationships, do you set up with VCs who are much more money focused, or do you set them up with angels who let you have a lot more control, right? Do you set it up with, when you go to big IPOs, do you set up a board like Facebook, or do you set up a board more like GE? I mean, there's lots of like little decisions that kind of come down to that. And so taking that same kind of framework, it's like, what happens with your data team? We still have the same kind of dilemmas and things that kind of come in. I mean, I think that relationships and roles are still there, and I think somebody's talking about building your data team, and so like the roles of your data team tomorrow, and so I'm super excited about that talk, so I don't have to talk about that too much here. But your relationship roles, now rewards, like they're really talking about money, right, and investment and equity or whatnot. Here, I think for data teams, often it's around mission, like what am I going to accomplish? What am I going to learn in this role? And like, talk a little bit about how we've shaped mission at both NumFOCUS and Rex, and so on. And then instead of wealth and control, I'll say innovation versus strategy here. I think almost every time I come up with a problem with a team, there's always this kind of, do I stick with the corporate strategy or the corporate line, or do I innovate and create a new idea? And while everybody hires data scientists to come up with ideas, they're usually constrained to a box of what are your operating procedures. And so there's a lot of learning how to work with your business executives and your colleagues, and what kind of innovation they're actually willing to accept. I think Katrina kind of hit on some of that a little bit in her talk. And so that's kind of like the framing of the talk. And so because I'm that kind of guy, I'm not going to start with number 1. I'm going to jump straight to number 3 and come back. So let's think about mission. So at NumFOCUS, our mission is to promote sustainable high-level programming language, open code development, and reproducible scientific research. And that mission comes up for us to create a wider galaxy of people who are doing reproducible science. Our mission is around science. It's not around necessarily exactly the code. It's not exactly the programming language. I mean, we do work in the high-level programming languages, but we also are here to serve scientists. So right away, we tell who we're going to serve, we tell how we're going to serve it, and then we work together with the community to make that happen. How do we work with the community? Educational programs, events, fiscal sponsorships, and data and scientific computing community. And so if you go back to the booth and say, this event right here is part of the educational program of the NumFOCUS organization. Getting all these folks here, getting them to talk about all these great content, letting Travis pitch his new ideas, letting learning about how Galvanize is revamping education. All these things happen because an organization is willing to come and be the underbone of that and raise it to y'all, and look at all the great things you do with it, right? So that mission enabled a huge number of folks to come together in Austin and collaborate together. And that's how mission in your data team will work. Your mission will set forth how your people will come work with you. And so very important, I think, in the kind of complete transparency, often NumFOCUS's mission is kind of, we've been around for about 8 years, and sometimes it's oh, we're going to just go find funding. Oh, we're going to do more community work. Oh, we're going to do some crazy project that Andy thought of to make sure everyone's using Python or R or Julia. But really, that education, bringing it back to the open code principles and actually having a mission that everyone can contribute is a very important aspect of building your data community. So at Rex, very similar. We come in, we say we're changing the way people buy and sell homes. So what are we working on? Buying and selling homes. For a larger number of people, we don't necessarily go back to just scientists. We don't go to a single group. We open it up to a very large audience. As that mission really matters, how you solve it, one-stop shop, caring team, lowest rates, and so on and so forth. So whenever you're building your data team, it really matters whether you're in a corporation, you're on a coding team, or you're doing some science, how you're going to actually get your mission together to motivate folks. So our mission really, both at NumFOCUS and Rex, has allowed us to get more people on the team and go forward. And you have to ask that of your community whenever you're building your team. Why are my folks here? What makes them interested in learning things? I think there are people here served in the biotech world. I've seen some folks here who do the climate change and work with hurricanes. We did a lot of modeling back when I was in academia. And when I started working with Travis, we started working with human trafficking and tracking human trafficking on the web and things like that. And so there's a huge effect from this community on the things that we produce, but our underlying kind of goal is to make it available for everyone to do these sorts of things. So that sort of kind of coming at it and understanding what your mission is and what you can accomplish with your mission is very important whenever you're building a team. So that's kind of my first lesson. If you get the mission wrong, you're not going to get people to join you. If you get it right, you're going to find out that people do way more than you ever expected. So next dilemma, innovation versus strategy. So I have to explain this a little bit, I think. What is innovation? So the story I love about innovation is the Wright brothers, the Wright Flyer. And here you see the product, right? Everyone kind of thinks of innovation like the light bulb, the airplane, the maybe some, the ledger, the blockchain. And really, those are effects of something else. and it's really the effect of an environment that created a culture that allowed people to challenge and change how things happened. So whenever you go read literature about where does innovation happen, you'll see things people talking about like a coral reef, where it's a diversity of ideas, or where you start in just like a very squalid area, like here in the Wright brothers, you see them in. This is literally where they did the test, and they did that test in that shack. They lived in that shack for I think it was 6 months or something, and by moving during the time of when all the aeronautics was blooming, and back in the 1910s or whatever, there was a lot of groups trying to get this, but everyone looked at the Wright brothers and says, look, those guys moved out to Kitty Hawk, where there's this nice hill that they can fly 3 times a day. And so that innovation, that trying over and over again and moving to an environment that allowed them to try over and over again, that was not a university, was not mandated by HR. I mean, they broke every OSHA rule possible. A lot of the things that you think of at a company that make it really great also hinder your ability to innovate. So that's kind of my viewpoint of innovation versus strategy. You still need to find a way to get your team to innovate, and repeated testing, figuring out how to maybe change a little bit of something, but also you got to pay the price sometimes of maybe not a nice facility, or maybe not the best paycheck for 6 months, and so on. But the other side is innovation has to come from everywhere. Personally, I don't believe that the best ideas come from Western society always, or that it's necessarily how fast you code. I think by making a very inclusive environment, you're able to bring all the ideas together and let them shake out and nurture and learn. And so your team really needs to understand that. How do you do that in a culture can be kind of tough. I mean, this is how do I build policies that make sure that folks in a bazaar and the Arab world can have the same weight as somebody on the subway in New York City? I mean, that's kind of a challenge. Here in the open source world, the code is open, we put it on the web. That means that anybody can contribute, anybody can put things in there, but I guarantee you those children in Africa have no way to interface with GitHub necessarily. So even thinking beyond just making it available, but also going out and inviting the right communities who maybe they're underrepresented usually because they haven't had the right invitations. And so actually building a culture where you invite people who maybe don't have the same opportunity as you did or as your peers do to participate in that innovative process. At NumFOCUS, we kind of put this together in what I call the 3 rules of NumFOCUS. First rule is build tools for science, because that's our mission. We have to go out and why we exist is to make science more effective through scientific tools. Be kind to each other. Rex talked about kind. I don't know, it's a very common thing in companies I work with. I want to work with people who are kind. I don't want to work with people who are jerks to each other. I don't want to work with people who, discount my ideas because I didn't go to the right school or something like that, right? So that kindness, I think, can be, mandated in a lot of different ways. I think there's a lot of fighting about codes of conduct on the web, but really what people are trying to do is just make sure that everyone's invited so we can talk to each other and be kind to each other. I think also in that, if I'm going to make a decision in the world, how do I tell people that? How did I engage with them to give me back some feedback to make that decision? I think over and over again, early years in NumFOCUS, we got told, you don't have enough transparency. You don't have enough people telling you and participating. It's well, it's not everything we did was open. Everything we did was in minutes on the website. It was on GitHub, but it was not transparent. And really what they meant was, we don't know how that decision is being made. We don't know why it's gotten made that way and how we can interface. So work really hard on the projects to say, if you have a project and you want somebody to commit to that project, you have to tell them how there can be a committer to that project. It's not like the early days when you just emailed Travis and your code got up into NumPy, right? You have to have you have to follow the code style. Their bug reports have a certain style. If you want an enhancement or a bug, you have to put it right there in the style of the bug report or the PR and so on and so forth. And by telling people how to participate, you're also giving them a path to innovate. So that innovation can be, you can still capture that spirit of it in some simple rules. And third, like I think this is probably the most controversial for our organization, NumFOCUS, is that we demand that you lead openly. And this is what kind of, I think Peter's talking about OSS values next tomorrow. But leading openly is like, it's more than a license. It's more than just making your comments in public. It's really about taking a collaborative approach with somebody. So if I give you some code, you will read that and if it's good, you'll take it in. You won't make me sign some document that takes away my rights for all sorts of things. You won't only accept it in a committee that doesn't get published their minutes out or doesn't even have an opportunity to participate in. You'll actually do it in a way that's open and the whole community can contribute to. And so that's probably one of the more like controversial ideas in like the open source world. And I think it's gotten lost. I think early Richard Stallman actually like tried to embody that, but then there were folks who kind of took open source just to mean like open code and free as beer and things like that. And so it kind of got muddied. And bringing that back, we don't necessarily want to take away people's licensing abilities because it makes scientists' lives harder. They can't use GPL code with code that comes from somebody else. So we prefer permissive licenses, but we really care about that leading open and making it so your code's available for others to use. And that's where we want to work with people. Similarly, like Rex is the company I help lead, and we do the same sort of thing. We try to, here's like directly out of our core values, build out trust, strive for excellence, and really care about people, care about what you're doing. And I think like Kim Scott's book, Radical Candor, she has like a nice kind of discussion about why giving a damn actually is a cultural value. And that, for us, like I like working at companies that do that. And so whenever we build out our data team, it's like, is this going to be the experience that helps more people save money? Is this going to be the experience that helps more folks sell their homes faster, better, or whatever their needs are? And of course, everyone wants to be excellent, so that's an easy core value. So if we just push each other to be better every day. But then there's also that trust, like be kind to each other and take care of each other. I mean, you have to push yourselves, but you also have to be kind to each other. So like building that core value that's really around people and around your interactions with people really supports that, that idea that we can still innovate together and move forward. And ultimately, I say, like, a community of innovation, I think we're open, we're here, we're diverse, we try to bring everybody in, and everyone always asks me, who's NumFOCUS? Like, everybody in the room is part of NumFOCUS. It's not just the staff, and Leah's over here. It's not just Leah and her staff, it's like the whole world and the projects coming together. So come be a part of like all the things we do and help us innovate. Okay, on the other side of that was the strategy, right? So it's great, you want to be nice, you want to be happy, you want to bring open code in, but you still got to like go, you still got to go take over, disrupt something. You still got to out-compete somebody or things like that, right? So you still have to have some strategy that's going to make it so you make your wins. In the data science world, first off, like I kind of like just breaking down like what we do. In my teams, typically, I try to bring in folks with domain experience, people who are good at wrangling data, folks who have a lot of modeling experience and like some computational experience. Like, so not only can you don't get away with just domain expertise or math, you have to have like a set of skills, and the team has to round out what we don't have necessarily. And then on top of that, I mean, a lot of people think about those things as like domain expertise and so on. I think also about like reproducibility and communication. Like visualizing the result is very important for your team to get right. And so I used to work at the supercomputing center here in town, and we had like this whole room that had like just giant TVs that you do visualization on. And you would say, why? And like nobody would use that. There's no science value to that. And like, but when Senator Hutchison comes through, she goes in that wall and sees how awesome it is. So that communication like was very, very important. And communicating not with necessarily internal teams, but those visualization tools to outside teams. And I'm very excited about like panel, like bringing dashboarding to our community in a faster way. I think that's something that, we as a community, like we can always be better, like getting our insights to people that matter. And I think what Kevin's talked about, Pets Alive, like helping them visualize what their policies are doing and how it's working is very important. So sharing the stories, so I love Jupyter. I mean, Jupyter was really built as a computational story. And then Conda, just to make sure that people can install these things and reproduce and do it for us. So even though I think this kind of is the view of like data science, like, you know, between computation and data wrangling and whatnot, I think also you have to think about some of the other aspects, the sharing your story and making sure people understand what you're doing. So that's like part of the strategy. Build your team to get all these different skill sets represented. Then there's like, so this is a great slide from a friend of mine, James Howison, about the platform strategy. And you think about, all right, I have all these different skill sets or codes or different ways to work together. And like you have like panel A over here, which is just kind of a point-to-point, whatever you need, whenever you need it kind of strategy. This is really talking about, you know, here, the way Apple took it is the third panel. So the first panel is kind of chaos, if you will, but point-to-point, like communication. Panel B being like a layered approach. We see this a lot in like in architectural books of like, all right, if you want to build a true architecture, you need a layer, and like the top layer, maybe that's the user layer, doesn't talk to the bottom layer, which might be your character device. I mean, not very many people here have written the character device code to their SQL query, and I think we are all happy that we don't have to do that. And so that's kind of a second approach. But then there's like the third approach, which is the platform strategy, and that's where you have a core set of capabilities that in that center that you could have like services that talk to that core set, or you could have, and in that core set you could talk to character devices or block devices or whatever you need. But all you ever worry about is that core set. And I think that a lot of like strategies around how you build out software has worked very well in doing that core platform strategy. I think it applies to your team as well. I think if you have a team, like, so if you take of like people and who they talk to, you take a very panel A like approach where there's like all sorts of chaos, you don't really get as much work done. It's very hard to know if, you know, 3 people are doing the same thing in this approach, right? Where in panel B, like if you have a hierarchy, you get kind of like the Amazon approach where like different folks, like you're only in your bubble or you're only in your bubble, and it works for a lot of organizations, but then it's hard to jump over to innovate between each other. Whereas like my teams, I tend to take like a data team platform, if you will. Like everybody comes to the data team, and the data team then goes to engineering or other needs that we may have. And we do it as a team. So in our team comes through, you know, it's not just coders, it's not just modelers, it's a whole variety of folks. I have an economist, I have business degree folks like running strategy, and it's really trying to get the whole team together to answer the data queries and actually produce ideas and analysis. So if you, from a strategy point of view, now deciding like what kind of regulations and what can happen and who can talk to who is very important, but then you have to make this actually translate into like the things we do. Technical strategy, like so. I was talking to some executives here in town at like a meetup, and it's like, all right, so here's the life cycle. I think this is maybe the least controversial version of these data science life cycles, but so you have like, you know, data acquisition, ETL, modeling, and then like evaluation. And I always kind of, you know, whether your data acquisition is like your Salesforce pipeline or like your web comments or whatever, like there's tons of different ideas there, but once you acquire the data, making it work for your process, I think frictionless data like shows like all the different problems that you have from data acquisition to ETL. And I think we all love talking about modeling, so I don't have to really talk too much about that, whether it's deep learning or scikit-learn. But the one thing I think is maybe something that I over-rotate on is evaluation. So it doesn't matter to me if you have the best model in the world. What matters to me is that somebody can use that model and make something out of it, make it better for somebody in our company or in our organization. I mean, that part maybe is like, I guess it's appropriate for me to focus on that too much, because if that's not right, then everything else has to be fixed in the background. But you could do this in a whole different number of ways. And if you're starting a young company, like which one do you pick? So here's like 4 kind of versions of this to do data science, right? You just do a full custom code, which is what I do all the time. Like that, like since I grew up coding and love to code, like almost everything we do together is like a full custom code, and the whole rotating life cycle. But then you have like frameworks coming out, such as Kubeflow, MLflow, and a lot of these open frameworks that take the whole life cycle for you, and there's a lot of great frameworks. I think MLflow is really interesting, and both of them are great libraries, but you give up some control, right? You give up the Kubeflow way of doing things or the MLflow way of doing things. And so I have to use Docker to use MLflow. I don't have to learn Docker, right? There's all sorts of like little things you're going to give up. Or then you can go to like some SaaS like companies like SageMaker or Data Studio. There's a whole bunch of like really great products that can handle almost all of the life cycle of data for you. And then off-the-shelf models, like maybe I don't even want to do, like if you want to lead an AI company today, I think someone said it, just start a company and start advertising on Google Ads. Boom, you're using AI, right? Because like Google Ads is all AI driven, right? So a lot of us like depend upon just off-the-shelf models, but we're data scientists, so we probably end up somewhere in these first three. So you have to pick kind of like how are you going to actually build out. So if you're going to build out a platform and a process, which kind of strategy are you going to take? Full flexibility, but maybe you have to hire more coders. No flexibility, but on the off-the-shelf models, but maybe stuff stops working. You hope it doesn't stop working because enough people want to use it. And I think where I see a lot of folks going is either the framework or the SaaS approach. And the SaaS approach is being, all right, you don't have to hire DevOps, you can hire just data scientists, right? So I don't have to have nearly as many people, but I think, going back to that, control aspect, I like the full custom codes. So the choices I typically make in almost every data team I've worked with is the PyData version. So I put Jupyter in the center because it does everything. I mean, Jupyter is its own force. It can do every part of these, but it can also be the thing that shows off what we do. Use Dask quite a bit for running all our data acquisition, whether it's just getting data out of APIs in Salesforce or running some actual calculation on the cluster. I mean, Dask is great for lots of asynchronous tasks. Pandas, all my ETL, you move it. I think every team I've had that's like worked with NumPy and SQL and then moved to Pandas and they're like 10% more effective immediately. So just the right tool for a lot of ETL jobs. And like we use tons of I put down here scikit-learn, but we use all sorts of modeling libraries. Scikit-learn just is kind of the nice representation of everything. And I don't think I ever have a project that doesn't go out with a Bokeh dashboard, which is why Rex is a sponsor of Bokeh, and we give our money where our mouth is and saying like, hey, we just wouldn't be able to talk to nearly as many of our clients in the internal company if we didn't have Bokeh on everything. And I realize that some of these stickers are no longer the same decals here, so definitely go check out the new Panda sticker and Bokeh sticker and so on. So it's always good. So that's kind of how I approach strategy in this. Like now, do I let somebody do anything they want? If somebody wanted to come in and put R into my system, yeah, okay, we can chat. But now you're going to, since I have full control, you're going to have to like learn how to do that bit. And maybe there is a really cool library, and there are a lot of really cool libraries out of R, but the strategy we've set up doesn't have R in our core structure, so now you're going to be responsible for putting that in and maintaining that. And usually people are like, oh yeah, I can learn Python. So it's like, okay, cool. I don't have anything against R or Julia. I love the languages, but the strategy has been set, and it does limit some of the innovation. It's how we have to work to go forward. Okay, so that's kind of like, first was get mission, have some strategy versus what innovation you're going to allow. Then this next part is like really mushy, and I apologize that it's not as well kind of understood, and I think there's a lot of discussion. Every time I go to a conference, I hear a lot about the different relationships and roles that data scientists need and have, and I don't have a lot of data here, but some more anecdotes and how I think about things. So first off, like just understanding like roles of the projects. And so there's four kind of points I want to kind of go through in this section. First is just like sustainability of data software. And so as NumFOCUS, we see a lot of projects spin up, spin down, like aren't supported anymore, or maybe they want more support. How do you maintain that? And like even in your company, like I think I saw the chief data scientist of GM get up and say like half of our data science projects fail. And so like, oh man, like if half of your investment in something fails, like what's going on? Why is it failing? And go a little bit, Katz and Hinson, or Dan Katz and Conrad Hinson have like a set of blog posts talking about this in the context of software. And I'll give a little bit about that. Then finally, like the second is like, you have to understand the economic engine principles around whatever you're doing. I know like maybe this is something I didn't think I would do, like, 8 years ago, whenever I took that job with Travis and Continuum, is like modeling the actual business process. And I think it's been said here by somebody else, like, if you want to make a lot of value to your company and a lot of value in the world, understand the economics by which your work is being used. Then finally, governance of resources. I mean, the IRS and SEC like put a certain restriction on companies, and like some of those restrictions are good, and we can think about that in our own projects and how it evolves and so forth. And then I'll talk a little bit about the challenges we have. So first and foremost, data software sustainability. Things break a lot. 50% of projects, I would say, fail. I think it's probably higher than that. And you could say the same thing, like, well, Andy, like 90% of startups fail, and like that's true, but I think that it's, people assess that risk, and I don't think it's always a total failure. But why are things failing? Conrad Hinson and Dan Katz make three basic points. First is that life cycles are circular and consumption is linear. So as you build up like your data science project, you have more needs for data, you have more needs for modeling, and so you add in more teams and more capabilities throughout your code or throughout your project or your team. But the consumption of these things it's growing linearly. So you have to learn, if I have 4 points in my cycle that I have to like fill those roles, now like I don't necessarily need the person doing QA or the evaluation when we have data acquisition kind of going on. But now I had the data acquisition from the last time and the data acquisition from the last time. And so as I consume, I keep on consuming more and more things. So even though my skills are circular and I learn at each project how to be very good at that life cycle, I'm still needing more and more resources as the project grows. And I think that a good example is earlier when Katrina said, what's up with that AWS bill? Like all of a sudden, like this thing that like ran on 3 nodes and took $1,000 last month is now we're running it on all our data, and it's $40,000, and then if we scale it up and run it for the entire internet, it's going to cost us $4 million. Like if we don't figure that sort of thing out. And so that consumption really puts an unfair barrier on your technology, and you always have to think about that. The second point, like roles and I'll dive into this a little bit more, but the roles and types of infrastructure vary, and it really makes it's subtle. But if your roles and your infrastructure don't really match, so for example, if I picked a full custom code, but I have no DevOps talent on my team, then I can't necessarily make my software go faster, right? So I have a team that we used Heroku for everything, and then people wanted to have a little bit better security performance, so we moved it to AWS, but nobody had ever heard of a Bastion security host or any sort of pairing of least concerns between like the operating cluster and the actual like control planes and whatnot. And it just didn't work because you have to have a lot of security experts to really maybe hit a PCIe compliance or a HIPAA compliant type architecture. And so you have to really think about that very quickly in the life cycle of your project, and it's really hard to predict that sometimes. And then there's the tolerance of risk, and like in business, if you talk about risk, people understand like what's the risk of losing money, so that really translates very well, but it also needs to be proportionate to the system that's dependent upon it. If I'm risking, a script that downloads I don't know, cats on the internet and makes no money, like nobody really cares if that system goes down. But if it's the credit card payment system, well, they care a lot. And so you need to put more infrastructure around that. And so understanding those trade-offs is very important for any software project, and especially a data science project, which we often try to innovate and we don't know what those are. So to give you kind of an idea of like the infrastructure varying and whatnot, we usually, so Hinson and Katz give this kind of like comparison to a city infrastructure. So you can imagine a slum that has lots of units and arguably should be torn down frequently because they don't maintain like proper hygiene or other things like that. You could also think of like a residential home which has a solid foundation for at least 25 years. Even though we try to lead them for 50, we can here in Austin you have like sandy soil and they kind of crack, right? So But it only services a single family. So if it goes away, like it's tragic for a single family, but it's not tragic for the entire community. And so we have services, we hope to help those folks. Then you have residential apartments, such as like large structures serving 5 to 100 years. Like this building here didn't exist 50 years ago, but we do expect it to be here 50 years from now. And it's going to have, dozens of companies and hundreds of people coming to it every day. And so if the toilets go out here, I guarantee you it's a bigger problem than if it goes out at your home. So like understanding the risk, and then you have city infrastructure that just must never fail. If it fails, we hope that politicians change tenure and things like that, although Flint, Michigan might prove otherwise on that. So in that same way, how does that go to software infrastructure and data science? So if all you're doing is a research paper, you have few results a year, you have very few upstream dependencies, very nice, like come give a PyData talk about it. If it doesn't exist beyond this, all right, great. You innovated, you had an effect, and you throw it over, and it might catch fire, it might not, but at the end of the day, we don't need to support that anymore. And there's like a group code, so maybe you have like my group right now at Rex, I think we had 50 different reports we gave over the last year. And so it services our code that built all that, services our group. We don't have to put it out. It makes it very easy to support, very easy to maintain, and we don't really need like all the burden of the community looking at it and doing PRs and all the maybe policies that you would have like in a NumPy code base or something. And so that's a really great level to like be at for inside your company. You can think about it there. But then there's like Pandas and NumPy, which service hundreds of people and hundreds of results. And so now you need an organization like NumFOCUS, something that is going to help them work together and have rules for governance and being able to understand each other's results, but also share very easily and make things go faster. And we all depend upon these domain libraries, the same as your team is going to depend upon HR or maybe other like companies like you and so on. So thinking about that infrastructure in your company, your group, and your code, and then there's like platform, like I think of like our OS. If like Apple just stopped shipping with Python, we'd have some words, right? It would be a real problem and a crisis in our community. We'd have to go figure out. So, but right now, like it's a pretty safe bet that Python and Max are still going to work together. I mean, they depend upon us. We depend upon them. So those are kind of like variants of like the infrastructure that you have to think about in the relationship and how you're building out your roles. Now the economic engine, like I like Goldratt. Every organization has a goal, and the goal is to maximize something while minimizing something else. Like if you ever want a linear programming book, go look up Goldratt, the goal, and it's like him teaching business people how to do linear programming. All right, so here's your maximize your goods sold while minimizing your operational expenses and your inventory. And like I think it was in the 90s when this came out, and it was like revolutionary to think that actually your inventory is not an asset. I mean, it was thought of as an asset by accountants, but it's actually a debt. Because you have that inventory, you no longer have the permission to innovate because you have to like process that inventory. You can think of the same thing in research or data science as maximizing credit for the things you do, but also your operation, minimizing like the number of operational techniques you have to do, or minimizing the governance or the resources you have to manage. If I have to manage thousands of bug requests, like I'm not going to get any features done, right? I'm not going to get much credit for the newest feature. So understanding how your team can minimize the burden on what they do while maximizing their credit is very important. Now, how does that relate to who we are and what we do? Well, I play out like there's 4 different types of people in the NumFOCUS world. I say there's intellectuals, like a professor at university. There's technical crafters, principal engineers at companies, community motivators, like your product managers or community managers inside the community. And then there's like folks who are entrepreneurs who really want to go out and get that economic engine rolling and making more money for the company. Thinking about them, each one's going to have a different economic engine. Intellectuals want citations. They need citations in order to keep tenure. They need citations to keep doing what they're doing. And they're going to get resources from federal research grants normally, and they generally use scholarly research. And how many people are on a data science team that actually reads papers every week or every month or so? Yeah. So see, we all use these folks. We love them, and the more we can give them credit for what they do, the more ideas they can give us. So that's a really great economic engine that we can participate in and your group can participate in. I've never been upset about working with an intellectual group like at a university and giving some, even giving them pizza money sometimes, like figuring out how to have a relationship where you just go talk to them once a year or have them come give presentations helps like both us and them. So I think that that's always something every group I've ever worked with, we've done a lot with intellectuals, whether at universities or think tanks or labs or whatever. The second is crafters, I think this, like you look at guys like, Peter or Peter Wang, who's a Bouquet, Travis, who's a NumPy, Wes McKinney, who wrote Pandas. These folks, they really, really love doing great software. And you talk to them, I mean, they will get into the nitty-gritty about exactly what, like we just heard a 45-minute talk about a U array, which I guarantee, like, you hopefully never have to touch, right? Like me and my role, like I hope I never have to touch a U array again, but I'm absolutely excited that Travis is going to go down and make sure it's extensible for everybody so like it can solve all sorts of goals for us. And today, like usually the way this kind of happening is we give them praise, companies give them highly paid positions, and they do a lot of software development, right? Or research or something that is a tangible thing they're crafting. Then there's like stewards, and I think of, for example, Leo over here, who really worries about the community health, builds these organizations to maximize the number of people who can come together and talk to each other and understand each other and can keep this innovation working. And so in a lot of how this works is a lot of private donations, some public grants here and there, but it's a lot of goodwill. I mean, I think that the fact that you're here and you're happy to be here and you thank the people who made this happen keeps them energized and keeps them doing it over and over again. And so give lots of love to your community managers and realize who those are in any team you have, whether or not I've never been on a data team that didn't have a champion at an executive level or somewhere else. And then entrepreneurs, yeah, we're the money grubbers. Like I'll confess to that. Like I go talk to investors all the time, and I really care about making sure that the business works very well. You don't have to serve them; like they'll just serve themselves. So running on. So thinking about that, like maybe I'll skip over some of the government resources, but you can think of the same idea. Like how do I carry this out? Like, how do we govern our resources and so forth? To kind of finish up, like some of the challenges around the relationships and roles that you have to think about is like what type of infrastructures are we supporting? NumFOCUS chosen scientists, our mission dictated scientists. We work on open code, so that gives us like the infrastructure we need. It doesn't make much sense for us to run a lot of AWS services because a lot of the libraries we support are on your laptops, and for us to like take over the service would be just a waste of our time and probably efforts, and when it's much more effective on your laptops, for example. The same thing as science. Science usually goes for groups and researchers. Companies usually, like the focus is on like, how do I help the consumer? And so you need to build those services so the consumer never has to think about software, things like that. And also you have to think about like these different economic engines between the different roles you have. And the goals are not aligned, but the more you can think about you bring in those people into your team and help them achieve their goals, the more everyone's going to like working together, and they're going to be kinder to each other, and everyone's going to actually get to that innovation much faster. With that said, it's the end of my talk. Is like the relationships, careers, and resource contentions matter a lot. Roles, it's always varied and evolving. I definitely go to the data team talk tomorrow. I think that's going to be really great to hear about experience of building teams. But remember, your mission is critical work because it's going to define those roles and relationship, and then figuring out how to make sure your team can still have strategies but also allow innovation. Thank you very much. Do we have time for a question, or anyone have a question? All right, we'll shoot.
Hi, first of all, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. My question is, if you look back at your experience of building a data science team, what was the worst experience, the worst decision you made that you don't want anyone to repeat? And what was the best decision you made that you want everyone to repeat?
Yeah, so the question is, thinking back on my experience, what was the the worst decision I made, and what's the best decision I made. Yeah, I think the worst decision, okay, the best decision, let's see. I think the best decision is to celebrate wins. Actually, like folks here at Anaconda, like everyone still comes up to me and says, Andy, like Demo Friday was awesome this week. I wish you were there. And it was just a way to like make sure like everybody had a spot to talk about the wins. And like, it's like, oh yeah, I helped you guys raise like tens of millions of dollars and helped you get to like a $100 million company. But like the only thing you remember is this Demo Day Friday. Awesome. Like, so bring like very successful wins. And the worst thing, I think the worst thing is always been when I put myself over my people. Whenever there's, you know, I want to go to this conference, so I'm not going to sit here and listen to like the review, or I have, you know, I don't have time to like necessarily meet with you every day. Or like a good example is Andy Grove's high performance output management. Something like, those words are in the title, not necessarily in that order. Have an order if you haven't heard. But in there he talks a lot about one-on-ones and how to take care of your folks, right? And like that, like in some sense, like creating like knowledge management and caring for the people who are working for you is like the most important aspect of being ahead of anything. And so there's oftentimes I put my own needs in front of those folks, and I think they've always kind of hurt me in some way or the other. So I don't have a single one, but that's generally what it is.
What's Demo Day Friday?
Oh, question, what's Demo Day Friday? So, and this actually, I stole this from Parsley, from Andrew at Parsley, so it's not like my idea or anything, but the idea being that you're in a group, you're in a company, you're in some tribe, but everyone has something to do. Like, give people the opportunity to praise. Like, we're going to do lightning talks right here, and lightning talks are an easy way for people to like come up and give a talk about something that they're passionate about without a lot of commitment. So our Demo Day Friday was like, tell us something you found interesting, or something you built, or something you can demo that makes people happy about it. And it really, the fact that it was there on the Friday and it was at lunch and like it was easy to go to, and we invited everybody in the company to come to it, meant that like you had permission to like be playful this 1 hour of the week, right? And so people got to look forward to it. It's like, not only did I like fix some bug in like some Kubernetes code because like gbuff protocol didn't work that like nobody in the world is going to care about. This 1 hour I get to come talk about it, and people will give me some praise. And so that notion of like sharing a very technical, deep way and in a very easy way, like, and that's why we have lightning talks at every event, is so that there's always an easy way to come in and give a presentation and whatnot.
One more. Well, thank you, Andy. Appreciate it. And